So tuning the violin is done by me with two ways. The fine tuners, if you look up here, these are the fine tuners. They screw in and out. They adjust the string tighter or looser, bringing its pitch up or down. The peg tuners do the same thing. As you turn it counterclockwise, it will go up in pitch. On that side counterclockwise. On this side clockwise will bring it up in pitch. And clockwise, turning it to the right on this side or turning it to the left on this side counterclockwise will bring it down in pitch. If you have fine tuners and they're fairly good ones, you may not need to use these pegs at all, or not as often. You may still need to use them. So I'm going to talk about tuning the violin for a second. As you probably already know, the violin has, the lowest string is G, the next string is D, the next string is A, and the next string is E. So it sounds like the A is slightly flat. It sounds like G and D are pretty good from what I can hear. Hard to say for E, because if it's in tune with the one that's off, it's going to sound good relative to that. So anyway, I'll proceed with tuning by using a tuner. The tuner is attached. If you have one of these kind of tuners, they're getting more common. You may have a different kind of tuner. It's basically a digital tuner or an electronic tuner, however it works. It basically hears, quote unquote, hears the string when it's turned on, and it tells you what note you're on or what note you're close to being on. So you turn it on, and then usually there's a light that goes on when you're just right, and then there's little arrows when you're pointing in a different direction if you're low or high to that note. So I'm right on. The light went on for G. I tuned this instrument before. Now I'm good for D. And as I had thought I was off for A, I'm a little flat. So the way to resolve that is you can just screw this, you can screw this fine tuner in slightly, and then your A is starting to become right. Now it's a little too high. I screwed. And also what I do is slightly stretch, because if I'm screwing it, you know, to where it goes down, I want to pull out any slack in there. I don't know, I learned that when I was playing guitar. It seems to help on violin, maybe not as much. So there, I got the light to go on, which means A is okay. So G, D, A, E, the light is on. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to purposely take one out of tune with this peg, just to show what you do when you have to tune it with a peg. So that's the thing with a peg, is just a slight turn can take it way out of tune. So that's way down now. So you need to get it back up to E. So you just take it up like that, and then take it up. A lot of times what I do is I push in as I take it up. So it's a little too high, but that's good, because sometimes over time, if you're tuning up more than down on these, the overall effect can be that these slowly get, these fine tuners slowly get screwed in deeper, and you might need to loosen or tighten the peg higher than it needs to be so that you can unscrew these. So So I'm unscrewing it now because I tuned it up a little higher. There we go. Light's going on. There, light's on. Now, one thing that is pointed out in other videos as well is the effect of tuning one string can alter the tuning of a different string. This occurs on a lot of stringed instruments, including the guitar, but it especially can occur on a smaller instrument like a violin or a mandolin. You know, you could have everything in tune on one string and then in tune the other string, and that's kind of putting more tension, which all of a sudden makes it too low for the other string. You put more tension on this string by tightening it, and then maybe this string or this string went down because that kind of pulled the body to where the tension is greater on this string, but it kind of made it lower on these other strings. I think the reverse is true. If you tune one way down, it might actually increase the tension on the other ones to where they actually went higher. I think I've experienced that before. But so you might have to go through this tuning process more than once, and you better really check it. You know, when you've tuned each one and oh, it looked just right here, you better go back and check the original ones, you know, double check them to make sure they're still in, and if they're off, adjust them again. And it's usually a very slight adjustment, but there's G, it looks okay. The light's going on for D as well. A is fine. E is fine. Okay, and then another thing I want to point out, as long as we're talking about tuning the violin, because this next thing I'm going to talk about may happen when you're tuning it. You may have a peg that is slipping, especially if you just bought a violin off the internet. You might have a peg that when you tune it up, even though you push in as you tune, it may go out of tune and start slipping down because it's brand new pegs. You know, everything has come right from wherever it was made. It might be a very low quality super assembly line production model. It might be a mid quality production, you know, assembly line. Machines have been doing all this. It might be a handmade one. Probably the more high class of a violin you've bought, the less likely this is to happen. But you can have slipping pegs. And there's something called peg drops that you can use for that. Now, what I've been told at a violin shop is peg drops were outlawed in their shop. I mean, they banned it from their shop. They said because over time it can result in stuck pegs. And that's the other thing I was going to talk about next, is stuck pegs, meaning you can't turn it left or right. And so with me, one thing I've used is one of these things that's used on guitars for tuning it. Some pegs will fit, some will not, but you can kind of attach that and try that, and it might provide some extra strength beyond your natural capability. And if not that, what I've used before is pliers. Now, I told the violin shop where I was at that I use pliers if it gets completely stuck, and they gave me kind of a shocked look because they make, you know, like these really high-end violins. They make some student models, but they're like the real deal violin makers. And they looked at me like I was weird. But what I didn't tell them is I'll use like maybe a cloth like this to help keep it from being maimed by the pliers. So I'll have a piece of cloth here, and then I'll use the pliers. Don't necessarily do that if you don't feel comfortable with that. Understand that I may be taking a risk. I don't know. You could break the peg. You could cause damage. You need to treat a violin like a baby. I mean, how close will you let a set of pliers get to a newborn infant? you probably want to keep the pliers away from it. And with the same with the violin, those pliers, if you don't really feel super confident in the use of tools, you don't want the pliers anywhere near this instrument, even just sitting there, you know, if you picked it up and accidentally dented your violin or something. So that's the last ditch effort, which I can't say I recommend it, but I have done that. And it comes up only because we're talking about tuning the violin. So we've got it tuned.